the importance of the film Zulu with Michael Caine.
Oh, so
for people of our generation, I mean, it lives in all of our consciousnesses. They don't show it on TV all that much anymore because it kind of shows us to be glorious and brave and things. But they used to show it on TV all the time. Right, you know, can you believe that? They used to show it on TV all the time. Every Christmas it seemed to be on. Every other rainy Sunday, somehow Zulu was on TV. And I've seen it without even trying a dozen times maybe, you know. You must have seen it tons and tons of times. Everyone that's of our age or older will be intimately familiar with this film. So anyone that's American or somewhere else in the world, they might not know that the importance or the fame of this film, this particular film.
I mean, it's not just your generation, my generation, my dad's generation. And it is truly, I mean, I joke that to be a British man, you have to have seen Zulu and the Italian Job, and maybe The Great Escape for the Treble. But these are the films that define the British character in different ways, and two of them star Michael Caine. And but my introduction to Zulu, it was on television. But when I was a boy, when I was between 8 and 12, every summer the National Army Museum in Chelsea would run a kids' summer club that would go on for about 6 weeks. And the National Army Museum, I don't know what it's like now. I haven't been there since it got refurbished a few years ago. But it was a little gem of a museum. And if you go there, the colonial history of the British Army was really played up. And there was a Martini Henry that you could use. I'm not sure if it shot BB pellets or it was one of those guns with a kind of light on it which hit the target. But you had the Martini Henry that you could use, and you'd have to do the lever. You'd have to do the lever, and right next to it was a diorama of Rorke's Drift. And on the top floor, they have an art gallery, and there's that painting of Isandlwana, the one with the mountain in the background and the last few soldiers kind of huddled around in the foreground. And that painting was hung there originally. And so what they did at the kids club, you did modeling and you had to do question and answer sheets and you interacted with real servicemen and things like that. And then, but they'd have films. In the afternoon, there was a film, and that's where I first saw Zulu. And every year they would show Zulu. It was the high point, and you would have 500 boys aged between 8 and 12 just crammed into this room, all watching Zulu. You know, it was because some of them you looked at it, Force 10 from Navarone, I think I'll skip that one. But no, not Zulu. And it's 2.5 hours long, and the fighting doesn't start until an hour into the film. Yeah. Yet it mesmerizes, it hooks people. And as I said, if you're American or no, the Australians get the appeal of Zulu. They understand. But if you're an American or if you're European or from anywhere else in the world watching this, I'm trying to think of an American film that has that cachet. Sands of Iwo Jima, perhaps. The Magnificent Seven. It's our Magnificent Seven. Yeah, I think, in terms of the cultural firmament.
Yeah, I sort of grew up on it. It was sort of difficult not to. Like I say, you couldn't really avoid it. It seemed to be on TV so often. And one of the things to say about it, before we go back into the actual history of what happened on that day, the film itself, it's a great piece of storytelling. They do take a few liberties with the historical fact.
Yes.
But it's a great piece of cinema, sort of that classic 70s thing, just like Zulu Dawn, actually, or 60s, actually. Was it? When did it come out, Zulu?
64.
Okay, oh, well, it's earlier than I thought. Okay, so it's that classic sort of 60s, 70s type of storytelling, type of war film, where there's no real action for ages. And then, like, the last whole half of the film is a battle, right? There's quite a lot of war films like that. Zulu Dawn's exactly like that. And Zulu is that. But one of the things they do is because it's way before woke, so there's none of this sort of playing ourselves down and making the Brits out to be pathetic or lame or evil. None of that. And the way the Zulu are depicted and treated is with a great deal of respect and care.
Yeah, absolutely.
A great deal. So there's it's completely unwoke in the sense that there's no real judgment. Like, there's no goodies and baddies at all.
No,
it's just
all about heroism.
Yeah, here's a bunch of warriors warrioring it out. And it's great. It's great.
Well, the thing is that I'm going to take my historian hat off and put my filmmaker hat on. And for me, Zulu is like one of the first modern-looking films. You know, if we think about a war epic of the last 20 years, or the films of Steven Spielberg, even, I think Zulu has a lot of the cinematic techniques. You know, there's one of my favorite shots in the film is where they can hear the Zulus running in the distance. And the whole camp just stops working on building the defenses. And the camera just slowly pans across the defenders at Rorke's Drift as they're mesmerized. And you think, that's a very modern looking shot. The crane shots, camera, the moves in, out, low angles looking up. Spielberg would have done this, had he been making. And you look at, say, older kind of historical epic films or war films, and the camera is quite straight on, and maybe there's a bit of back projection of Iwo Jima as John Wayne's there, but Zulu looks modern. It looks fresh, and I think that's what keeps people coming back to viewing it, because it's 1964, but that lush Technicolor, the 70mm wide screen. No British film had been in 70mm. Well, maybe Lawrence of Arabia was, but this is an epic, and it's pitching itself as this modern blockbuster epic before such a thing was even known. And I think that adds to the whole experience. The John Barry soundtrack as well. It's so distinctive. And there's like an actor like Michael Caine. This is his first really significant role on screen. The legend of Michael Caine starts there. And and that's why I think audiences keep coming back to it, because it doesn't seem like a film made from a bygone era of very static cameras, and kind of the acting also, the performances seem fresher than, say, the staid British stiff upper lip, Reach for the Sky, Dam Busters, even though I love those films. But there's a style of British acting. And Zulu is a little bit more kind of, it's believable because these guys are on the edge. There's moments in the film like where Chard's trying to reload his revolver and his hand shaking. The desperation of that final attack, and they retreat to the redoubt and stuff, and the defense of the hospital. It's the British not being stiff upper lip. It's the British being desperate and kill or be killed. And, there's nowhere for me to run. I have to do this. And I think that's a refreshing take on the British cinematic image.
So that's the thing to say before I say another few quick words about the film itself. It's a Last Stand Alamo type story. Everyone there is expected to die. Unlike the Alamo, they do actually nearly all survive. There are a few casualties, but we'll get into the details of that in a moment. But what it is, the story, why it's so sort of desperate, is because they are expected to be overrun and every single one of them massacred to a man. So it's a Last Stand, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid type deal. That's what it is. And of course, based on a true story. But a couple of quick things to say about the film again, in a general sense. It's very, very cinematic, isn't it? You're quite right. It's quite modern in that sense. It's not that sort of old black and white 50s, very staid, and all the acting is sort of very wooden, and everyone just delivers their lines and that's it. It's not like that. It's quite emotive. It's very emotive, actually. And everything, not everything, I don't want to overdo it, but for me, anyway, everything about it is brilliant. The acting, just the story itself, it's just great. If it ever comes on TV, if I ever see it's on TV, I will watch it. There's just no doubt. That's that afternoon sorted for me. Even though I've seen it, like I say, easily a dozen times, probably more. Michael Caine plays it. He's posh though, isn't he? Because you never know with a Michael Caine film whether he's going to do the London thing, be Michael Caine, or whether he's going to be extremely well spoken. And anyway, in this one, he is, because he plays the officer, doesn't he?
Well, he was last minute casting.
Is that
because
right?
he actually auditioned. he auditioned for the role of Private Hook.
Oh, really?
Which went to James Booth, and the producers, they hadn't cast the part of Bromhead. They saw a lot of sort of young, foppish, Etonian type actors, but they said, but the film was conceived to be this action epic, and they said these guys aren't going to cut it in an action epic. And they looked at Michael Caine, and Michael Caine was actually in the same theatre company as James Booth, and also Glyn Edwards, who plays Corporal Allen. They're in Joan Littlewood's kind of East End London theatre company, which was starting to get well renowned. And so they said, "Well, look, we're leaving for South Africa in a week, and we haven't cast Bromhead, and that's a major role." And Caine himself said he did an awful audition. He said, and he walked out thinking, "I'm never going to get this." And then the producer director Cy Enfield just said, "Come back, Mike. We haven't got anybody else. We're leaving in a week. I'm going to take a punt on you because James Booth and Glyn Edwards say you're okay, and we'll sort out the rough edges of your performance when we're in South Africa." So yeah, he got called on the last minute, and Caine said he based his portrayal of Bromhead on the Duke of Edinburgh, and also his time in the army in Korea.
Yeah, he was in the army, wasn't he, Michael Caine? Yeah, right. Yeah.
Upper crust officers never have their arms in front of them or their hands in front of them unless they're wielding a weapon. So he said his Bromhead would always be seen, if he's not holding a weapon, with either his arms by his side or his arms behind his back to show the troops he shows no fear in the face of the enemy. He can expose his front, his chest to the enemy. So he made a conscious decision. He said Bromhead, for him, was all about having the arms behind the back as much as possible in the dialogue scenes.
There's so many great bits in that film. Let's just dwell on it for a while before we go back to the history. There's one bit in it when the colour sergeant, the superb colour sergeant, there's one bit in it that sticks out for me. You mentioned an anecdote of your childhood where you were watching it. I've got a couple of memories rolling around in my head of specific memories of watching Zulu as a child. There's one bit where they're waiting for one of the Zulu attacks, and the colour sergeant says to one of the privates whose tunic isn't buttoned up properly, it's Mr. Button or something. And he says, "Do your buttons up properly, man. Where do you think you are? Who do you think you are?" But he said, it's just quietly, it's just that very, very quiet, absolute authority.
Mark your target. Look to your front.
Hitch. Do your tunic up.
Your tunic?
Do it up. Where do you think you are, man?
And it's the thing of, if you're going to die, do it right. If we're going to be killed for Queen and country, you're at least going to be properly shaven, have your tunic done up correctly whilst you do it. Come on, standards. I just remember something like that. It's just stuck in my mind, my consciousness forever.
Well, that whole depiction of Colour Sergeant Bourne, who in real life was 24 years old. He was the youngest colour sergeant in the British Army at the time. Wow. But apparently the persona is the same, even though it's played by a middle-aged actor in the film. But apparently the real Colour Sergeant Bourne was like that, where do you think you are, lad? And the other one is another great line that Bourne comes out with is when Private Cole says, "Why us? Why us?" He says, "Because we're here, lad, and nobody else." And that just sums up. In fact, if he had a tagline for the film, that would be it.
Yeah.
But also when the Reverend Wick gets drunk and he's shouting all these biblical prophecies of doom, Bourne knows the references, and he says quietly, he finishes the quote. So he says, "You're not going to out-Bible me, Reverend." And Bourne is this, there's a standout image where on the first Zulu attack, and the first Zulus are over the barricades, and Bourne stands there with the Martini Henry with the bayonet on the end, and he's challenging the Zulu just with a look. And the Zulu cuts back to the Zulu with the assegai raised. And that's, as he said, it's about heroism. It's that there's a Zulu and there's Colour Sergeant Bourne, and neither of them are going to give in. They're not going to give up. It's man versus man, skill versus skill. And that's so much of the core of the film.
Yeah, there's this idea, isn't there? This theme. Well, it's more than a storytelling theme. It's a real life thing. because they all expected to die. You know, they all expected to die. When all that is left to you in the face of certain death, when all that's left is the manner in which you meet your doom, that's all important. That becomes all important. You know, quite often I used to think, or people said, it's surprising how many people are led out to their execution are calm or keep a lid on it. Well, quite often when that's all you've got left is a tiny shred of dignity in the last hours or the last minutes, the last seconds of your life, all that's left to you is to try and hold on to any shred of dignity you might have left. I mean, that theme, that idea runs through Zulu. As I say, they don't all die, but that's remarkable, and we'll get to that. But one other great couple... oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the scene with Hook in the hospital. So the Hook, that's the biggest historical inaccuracy, is the way Private Henry Hook is depicted. In real life, he was a model soldier who defended the hospital because he saw that as the right thing to do, to protect the very infirm who couldn't hold a rifle. In the film, he's the drunken layabout soldier who redeems himself in combat. But that is exactly right. He is, when there's nothing, the hospital's on fire. It's collapsing all around him, and he just, what has he got left? Just pick up that rifle and fight. Fight like he's been trained to do, but he's purposely forgotten how to do for his superiors. But at that moment, the soldier kicks in, the comrade of his friends. You know, he is back in the fold as a soldier to redeem himself. And of course, he has to have the swig of the brandy in defiance, you know, because he's not 100% redeemed, but he's redeemed enough. You know, and that's the film's story arc for the real life guy, who's completely different.
The thing to mention again is a lot of these are Welshmen from the 24th. So, yeah, a lot of them are Welsh. One other bit in the film, which I find most people agree find sort of iconic, or it just sort of sticks in the memory, you know, just a great piece of storytelling and cinema, is the sort of the sing-off they have. At one point, the Zulus start doing their war chant or their battle song, that sort of deep guttural sort of Zulu style chant thing, and the men of the British Army, mostly Welshmen, decide they shall answer it with a hearty rendition of Men of Harlech, and it's just a great thing. Again, the two fingers up in the face of death. Is that no, we're not going to run away. Again, when the preacher chap will say, "You're all going to die. You may as well run away. Why would you commit suicide by staying here?" Effectively, it's like, now, not only am I not going to run away, but in the moment of heat, in the moment of death, I'm going to remain absolutely resolved to not give in, to throw two fingers up in the face of destruction. That's heroism. That's you know, you can't. That's just so great. You can't knock that. It sort of gets the heart going.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.